Hello and welcome to another part of my Souls-like combat tutorial series. In this episode I'm gonna show you how to create different attacks for your player character. But before that, let's go back to your animation blueprint and delete the reset player state anim notify, because I was kinda stupid. We can handle it in the movement input handler. Just as we turn on the input for the player, we just grab the current player state and set it to none. Now with this setup we can actually go and create the attack system. Now the first thing we will need for the attack system is a blueprint class of a type actor, and this will be our master weapon. Open it up and let's add one static mesh here. Let's call it weapon mesh. And let's also create a variable called current weapon mesh. It will be static mesh and it will be editable and expose on spawn. Now what we want to do is, right when the actor will be spawned, we want to get the weapon mesh and set static mesh to the current weapon mesh. What this means is whenever you spawn the actor, you can actually set the weapon mesh itself. So you don't need to have a million childrens of the weapon, you can have just one instance of a weapon and use that. Now we also need another variable. This one will be attack animations. And the type will be structure, but the structure will need to be created first. So right click, go to the blueprint, structure, and call it as weapon attacks. Open it, and the types will be anim montage. Let's add a bit more. And first one will be running attack, then rolling attack, backstab, riposte, and light attacks with heavy attacks. Also these last two will be erase, because we will have more than one heavy attack and more than one light attack. Now go back to the master weapon and set the variable type to the structure we created. It will also be editable, expose on spawn. With this, each of your weapons can have different attack animations, which could be, for example, added through data table or something of that kind. But for now, I'm just gonna add the attacks right here. I already created the attacks, so I'm just gonna set them. Also, don't forget to add reset movement input to each and every of your attacks, right where you want the animation to end, or rather combo with the different attacks or different inputs. Now with that, we can go back to the third-person character, create a variable called equipped weapon. It will be the master weapon. And we should also spawn some weapon in the character's hand. So for that, let's create custom event, and it will be called equipped weapon. So now we need to spawn the master weapon. And for the transform itself, we will need a socket mesh. So find your skeleton and create a socket for your weapon in the correct hand. For me, it's gonna be the right hand, so right click, add socket, and I'm gonna call it right hand weapon socket. Now go back to the third person character, get the mesh, and get socket transform. Of course, the socket name will be right hand weapon socket, and the return value will go to the spawn transform. The collision will be set to always spawn and ignore collisions, which also reminded me that we forgot to set the collision for the weapon mesh to nothing. So let's actually do that. And the current weapon will be some kind of a weapon. For me, it's gonna be this weapon sword right here. And also don't forget to set it to the equipped weapon itself. Now right at the event begin play, let's just create another then in the sequence and type equip weapon. And now when we play, oh, also I forgot to attach it to the actor. So go back to the equip weapon, and from the return value, let's attach actor to component. The parent will be the mesh, and the socket name will be the socket name you created, and also snap to target. And now when we play, we can see that the weapon is in the player's hand, but it's badly rotated. For that, let's go to the skeleton mannequin and add preview asset. Now we can just rotate it correctly. Nice. Now it's properly attached to the player. But we cannot attack yet, so let's change that. Go to the third person character and let's create another custom event. This one will be called Attack Counter Handler. This event's purpose is to combo light attacks from first to second to third, or the heavy attacks from first, second to third to fourth, or whatever you have. So for that, let's create an integer called attack counter, get it and increment. And after that, we want retriggerable delay. I'm gonna set it to 2 seconds for me, and then set the attack counter to 0. Which means that whenever we call this function, we first increase attack counter by 1, and then after 2 seconds, we set the attack counter to 0, so the player will attack with first attack after the 2 seconds. But maybe we want to instantly set the attack counter to 0, so we also create another custom event. This one will be reset attack counter, and let's hook it just here. Now we can actually create the input action itself. So go to the input actions, right click, input action, and I'm gonna call it primary attack. Open it and let's add one trigger. It will be tap. For it to actually work, we need to set it in the input mapping context. So add one mapping and set it to the primary attack, and it will be left mouse button. Now in third person character, right click and get your input action. And of course, first we want to check if we actually can attack and if we have the stamina for attack. Of course, when it's false, we want an input buffer. The input action will be this input action, and of course, stamina will be this. Now if we can attack, we need to firstly stop the stamina regen, and then we want to handle the attack itself. For that, create another macro. This one will be called handle attack. It will have one input of the type execute, and go to the event graph and set the handle attack right at the end. Now go back to the handle attack, and first things we want to do is turn off the movement input. Then we want to decrease the stamina. The amount can be whatever you want. Also, you could get the amount from your weapon if you want. You could just create another variable here, but for me it's gonna be just 10. And also let's not forget to reset stamina bar. Now whenever the player actually attacks without being locked on in any Souls games and he is using his movement keys, he can actually rotate based on the movement keys when he attacks. So for that we need to create a function called update attack rotation. Firstly, we need to check if the player is using his movement keys. If he is not, then we just want to return. But if he is, we need to get the last movement input vector, rotation from X vector, and set actor rotation. But we don't need all of the rotations, so let's split the struct pins right here and just hook the yaw. Now go back to the handle attack, grab your update attack rotation. And also, before we play the animation itself, we need to get the correct animation. So for that, we also need to create another function called getCorrectAttackAnimation. It will have two outputs. One will be anim montage, and it will be called animation. And another one will be the player state, and it will be called update player state. But before we do this function, we need to actually go to the player state and add the attacks right there. So open the player state and add some enumerators here. First one will be light attack, a heavy attack, a running attack, rolling attack, backstab, and riposte. Essentially all of the attacks that you have in the structure. Now with that setup, we can just get the current player state and switch on player state. Now let's set up the basic attacks. So get the equipped weapon, get attack animation, break the structure, and now you've got all of the attacks from your weapon. So firstly, let's set the running attack to the running attack right here, and also set the updated player state to running. You can also hide the unconnected pins here, so it will look more neat. The same will go for the rolling attack, so just copy it, set the rolling attack. Also, don't forget to update the player state. And now for everything else, we will check if we are trying to use the light or heavy attack. So for that, we need to create a branch, and let's hook everything here. Also, the step back is the rolling animation too, I forgot. And now the first thing we will check is if the player is holding his left shift, because in the Souls games, whenever you are holding left shift, it means you want to make heavy attack. Sadly, I don't know how to make it in the input action and input mapping, so I'm just gonna get the player controller and check is input key down, and the input key will be the left shift. And now we need to get the specific animation that we need from the arrays. So for that we need another function. This one will be called check if counter exceeds attack. Firstly, it will have input that will be any montage array. It will be called attacks array, and also one output. This one will be single, and it will be animation. Now first we need to check if the attack counter is greater or equal to the attack array length. So grab the attack counter and check if it's greater or equal. Also grab branch, and from attacks array we need to get the length -1, because the arrays start from 0 and length starts from 1. And if it's equal or greater, which means that it is the last attack in the array, we need to get and also last index. This will get the last animation attack and hook it into the animation itself. But we need to reset attack counter itself before that. Now if it's not greater or equal, that means that there are still more than one animation that the player can combo. That means that first we want to get the attack counter handler, which, as you might remember, increases the attack counter itself. And now we need to get the animation, so get from the attacks array, get the attack counter, and -1. With this we can return this animation. Now this is the whole setup for the comboing the attacks. So now when we go to the get correct animation, we can grab the function and set the light attacks here. Also copy the return node. And if this is false, which means we are not holding the left shift key, we want to just light attack. But if we are holding the shift, let's just copy this and get the heavy attacks. Also updated player state to heavy attack. I think I didn't explain the player state itself. For example, you can use it for input reading when the enemy wants to hit you. For example, if the player is healing, so the enemy should be more aggressive to stop the player from healing. Or for example, it might be used when the heavy attacks, riposte, light attack should have different damage types. So you can also check it with this, and you can just switch on it and deal damage based on the attack itself. Now go to the handle attack, get the correct attack animation, and now we just need to play the anim montage. Of course, this target will be self. Anim montage will be from the correct animation. And afterwards, we need to start the stamina regen and also update the player state itself. And now when we play, we should be able to... Yes, we do have our light attacks. We also have the heavy attacks. When we're sprinting, we can run attack, and when we roll, okay, there is some kind of bug here, and I think I know what the bug is. Let's delete the current player state in the movement input handler, and firstly we need to get the mesh, get anim instance, and check if is any montage playing, because if it is, we don't want to set the current player state to none. But if it isn't, we want to set it to none, which means that we need to get delay here. Let's set it to 0.2, and the completed will go at the start of the branch. And now, if it's false, we just set it to none. What this means is that whenever we play the animation, we need to check if the animation stopped, and if it stopped, it just set the current player state to none. And if it didn't stop, it will just loop until it will stop. So now, when we roll, yes, now we can also have the rolling attacks. And now when we play, we should be able to also roll attack, yes. If you would like to have more attacks than this, you could expand the player state or with the structure and do whatever you want. Also, if I'm correct, you shouldn't be able to combo the light and heavy attacks like this in the Souls games. That can be done pretty easily. You just create another variable of the type boolean called was previous attack light attack or was previous attack heavy attack, and you'd check it, and if it's true, you'd just turn the attack counter to 0. So, thanks for watching. I hope this tutorial helped you somehow, and as always, have a great day.